All right. This is John King. I'm speaking with Shane Morigeau, who is a representative in the Missoula area at the Montana legislature. He worked in the House, I should say. And he's also got some notoriety recently for writing a letter asking for the removal of a fountain that was put up by the Daughters of the Confederacy in Helena. And as today, I understand, I think they're going to take the actual fountain down today. And I guess I wanted to get just kind of a follow-up interview with you to kind of feel out how you feel that your letter was taken and whether and how you feel about the developments since that you sent that letter.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me proud of our state, that, we're having a discussion about this. And like I said, when I talked to folks originally, I said, we need to have these conversations and we need to have a robust discussion about, what that fountain means to everybody, not just one group of people. I look at the article that came out yesterday about from the Historical Society and the perspective and research they had. The unfortunate thing about that article was it was all an ethnocentric historical perspective. It looked at it from one lens of one people, and there was no talk about what was happening at the era with American Indians, with allotment and assimilation timelines. It was a really dark time for Indian people and people of color. Segregation was still alive and well, and racism. There's probably not a whole lot of talk with local minorities because they probably weren't being included in that conversation there in Helena at the time. So, it makes my heart, makes me proud and warms my heart to see that the commission. I have to commend the commission for stepping up and removing that and for being strong on that issue. I think it has spurred a conversation, which we need to have these conversations about what these things mean to non-whites. We need to realize that we can't just continue to whitewash history, and we have to take into account everyone's perspective and on how these types of things make people feel and what they represent to them. And I think the city commission has recognized that, and I'm so grateful that, the Helena delegation, the Montana American Indian Caucus, everyone in our local communities that reached out and shared their support in having that monument removed.
Now, what do you think should happen to the fountain now that it's, I guess they're not done, it's still out there. In fact, I understand there's some kind of a protest going on today. What do you think should happen to the fountain if it is removed?
Yeah, I mean, today I just got some pictures from a friend that lives over in Helena, and apparently there's people out there protesting with Confederate flags, which to me justifies it justifies the whole reason behind taking it down. It represents exactly what it stands for in racism and hate, and I think that's the true colors of some people that are out there protesting it are coming through, at this time. So, I think it's. I'm sorry. What was your question again on that?
I was asking what you thought should happen to the fountain.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I think that's up to the community and the city there. I think they've had some discussions about putting it into a museum. I'd obviously like to see it taken down or removed. It doesn't have a place on public property. And I think, I've been hearing this. People have been saying, we can't tell the history of the fountain if we can't point to it. It's like, I'm pretty sure history is told by people, and we can still spread our history of what racist monuments meant by having discussions about it.
So would you prefer that it be destroyed? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, I'm just glad to see it being removed from the city. I think, that if it went into a museum, they could explain it, and talk about what it represented at that time. I think that is a more appropriate setting for it. But I guess I lose sleep over seeing it destroyed. But I do think that the community there and the people there who think it could be utilized and put into a museum and people could talk about it, so be it. If that's what they want to do with it, then that's fine with me. I just think it has no place where it is, and I don't think it has a place in our community when the context is, people are like, oh, we need to point to this. It's like, you're telling me we need to go point to a monument that honors Confederate soldiers who fought for slavery. I think we can still do that. It can be put into an appropriate setting.
Now let me ask you this: you've read the same article that I read in the. I read it in the Missoulian. I guess you read it in the Great Falls Tribune or another paper. But it's all Lee Enterprises, right? So, but the piece that I read was titled "History Buffs Discuss Plans" by Jesse Chaney and Holly Michaels. Yep. And I thought it was kind of interesting to read at least the spoken intent of the fountain. And this is what they put in here. This is supposedly a transcript of a 1916 article on the building of the fountain, where they talk about the motives of the gifts. She said that she, quote, and she being the woman who helped organize the group there, Georgia Young. She lauded the present-day American spirit, a spirit of union with no feelings between the Old North and the South, which had caused such bitterness and sorrows years ago. On behalf of the Daughters of the Confederacy, they write, I present this fountain to the city of Helena as a token of our esteem towards our new home. The fountain is a tribute to the Confederate soldiers who offered their lives in the war and conflict of ideas between the people of our own country. It is out of the depths of abiding and fondest memory that the women of the South, who have made this wonderful Western country their home, are putting their lives into it. Plant this tribute of old home love to make beautiful their new home. In that spirit, the Daughters of the Confederacy in Montana have built this fountain. I was doing some reading myself. I mean, especially formative for the state of Montana were a large population of people that came out of the South to Montana that had family members that died in the Confederate, on behalf of the Confederacy during the Confederate War. And this particular fountain I thought was kind of interesting in that the sculpture for it was a Union man's son, and obviously the South was it. To me, I think some people see it as rather instead of a divisive thing, a sign of unity between the North and South.
Sure. Well, okay. Well, I would say this to that. I mean, that same article mentions that the people giving the historical context say, well, it may have been donated by the United Daughters of the Confederacy at a time to, some say, to romanticize the Confederacy and rewrite history of the Confederacy. And I think the person said, well, I don't believe the fountain was. That's what they really meant by it. But I think when you hear someone say, there's no feelings between North and South, then why was it just for the South? Why was it just to honor Confederate soldiers? I mean,
do you think that might be part of the reason why she had a Northern sculptor?
I don't know what that would matter if someone sculpted it who's from the North. If they're being commissioned to make something for money. When they
have an American artist come over to Japan to build a monument to those who died at Hiroshima, that has some significance that the artist is an American, don't you think?
Sure, I think in that case, though, we're honoring something completely different. We're talking about a whole different context, and I think when we look at this particular statue, I think you said that the person said these people offered their ideas between the people of our country, conflicting ideas.
War of ideas, she described it.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Ideas between the people of our country, conflict of ideas. And what ideas was she talking about? She didn't say it. She was talking about slavery, and we're talking about the ideas of slavery, and no historian discussed that, what that actually meant, what were the issues they were actually fighting for when she gave that particular speech. So I think my discussion about what was going on in the era is important, because, you can say one person who was a Union soldier, actually was the one who got paid to build it and commissioned to build it for the person. But I think if you actually look at what was going on at the time period, and the fact that, I didn't see any discussion of Indians or blacks showing up to that memorial for the Confederacy. I think if you look at what was going on in the country at the time, it was the assimilation and allotment era for American Indians in Montana, and we're just over the past fighting for survival. Another thing that got discussed in that historical background was the fact that the organization, right earlier before that, wanted to put up a photo of Robert E. Lee in uniform
in the Helena school, I believe. Yeah.
So, and people also tend to forget, right in 1915, the famous film known for being one of the most racist films in history, 3-hour silent film, came out called The Birth of a Nation, which glorifies the KKK and white supremacy, which also was mentioned in that article from the historian, that there was, or it's been brought up several times, that this organization openly supported the KKK at the time. So I think, like, if someone, just because someone says they mean well and they put up something, doesn't mean that it still doesn't represent something. Someone could go up and put up a statue of something that hurts a lot of people and say, well, to me, this means something nice, but it doesn't mean that it meant something nice to everybody at the time, and at the time frame. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't represent racism and hate. Like, my whole thing is why didn't, at the time, did they not commission it and say, let's do it for everyone who was all the fallen soldiers of the Civil War, to recognize all the soldiers of the Civil War, and not just the Confederacy. I know that there was a mention in the article, in another article, that there apparently is some sort of fountain that does that exact same thing in, like, the Seattle area, where it represents both the North and South.
Well, a question for you. So now that the fountain is likely to be removed, do you think a new fountain should be put in its place?
That's totally up to the local community, and if they decide that it should. There's probably a million different things that they could put up that, if they wanted to do something that talked about the Civil War, and talked about what it meant to everybody, or the era when that fountain was built in 1916, like what was going on in the era, and put another fountain up. Or I just think they have to, if they put something up, it should represent everybody, and not represent an organization that fought for slavery. So I think there's probably a million things they could put up. I've heard people say all types of things, like honoring our Montana Indian communities, or honoring soldiers of the Civil War, or whatever. I think that's up to the city, but I just hope that whatever they decide to do in the future, that they, I'm sure it'll be very well thought out. This particular commission seems to take this stuff very seriously, which I really appreciate.
Isn't this the same commission that you criticized for not putting up a plaque?
The Helena City Commission?
Yeah, the last time I spoke with you, you said that they said that they were going to put up a plaque and they never got around to it. So I'm not so sure they're very quick on their word.
Well, they are now. So they've reacted to this, and I'm sure they could have made a different decision, and in my opinion, they've made the right decision. So, you have to commend people when they make the right decisions, whether, they failed to get a plaque up there before, or they talked about the process and why that was such a why that was stalled out for so long. But I think now that they've acted and they've already made the efforts to actually go and remove it, you know, I have to give credit where credit's due. You know, these guys are doing the right thing, and you know, it's not an easy decision.
All right. Well, hey, thanks so much for chatting with me, Shane.